Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And I made a video earlier today that was very similar by Dante's Boxing Nation. But I thought that this video was particularly even more interesting because this is yet again going to prove my point even further. When it comes to this JERMALL CHARLO versus Canelo Alvarez fight, I think that it is in particular, a very interesting fight. When it comes to JERMALL CHARLO, if you were to ask me, do I think that JERMALL CHARLO actually has a super duper realistic chance of defeating someone like a Canelo Alvarez? No, not necessarily. And a certain amount of people, of course, will disagree with me. They'll say, oh, JERMALL CHARLO, he's a two-weight division champion. Did you see how he looked against Sergey Derevyanchenko? Yes, I did, and I've seen how he's looked against several other fighters in his career. I think JERMALL CHARLO is a very good name. I think that JERMALL CHARLO, especially from a monetary perspective, like I've been saying, I think that if you're talking about especially not only a good fight for Canelo, talking about an opponent all in all that is just a good name to have in your resume, but on top of that, someone that, of course, is also going to bring in certain pay-per-view numbers, JERMALL CHARLO, in my opinion, is a fight that makes sense. But JERMALL CHARLO, just talking about, pretty much even at his best, even if the JERMALL CHARLO from the Sergey Derevyanchenko fight, even if that JERMALL CHARLO shows up, do I think that he has a super duper realistic chance of beating a solo Canelo Alvarez? No, I don't. Why is that? Because I just think that JERMALL CHARLO, I just think that he's too limited as a fighter compared to what Canelo Alvarez is. When I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, I feel like I'm watching the creme de la creme. And no, I'm not just some Canelo Alvarez fanboy. It is what it is. And of course, a lot of people who may tune into my channel, who may be newer, they may say, oh, well, you just come across as a Canelo Alvarez fanboy. Listen, I get it at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, everything that I say is going to have some sort of sense of realism. And I've been watching JERMALL CHARLO for several years. I watched him overall at the beginning of his career. I've watched him within his past several fights. I've watched him within his past few fights. And JERMALL CHARLO, not even me, but I think a lot of people, they're even surprised that he made it this far to being undefeated. Listen, I like JERMALL CHARLO. I think that JERMALL CHARLO, he is a very decent champion. I think that beating JERMALL CHARLO for Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, I think that it pretty much is on the same level as winning over Caleb Plant or a Billy Joe Saunders or a Callum Smith or a Danny Jacobs. In my opinion, all those wins, they're pretty much on the same level. Like I said, the only win, in my opinion, overall within the middleweight / super middleweight division, or divisions, that Canelo has that really sticks out, or at least, from the rest of them, in my opinion, is that Gennady Triple G Golovkin win. Now, all of them stick out in a way. If you have a win over Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, Danny Jacobs, and Gennady Golovkin, all those wins stand out. All those wins are A-grade wins. And, of course, that's not even bringing up the light heavyweight division win over Sergey Kovalev, even though he was, knocked out a couple times at that point in time in his career. But he still was a champion. So we have to give Canelo a lot of props for any of those wins. But at the end of the day, when I take a look at JERMALL CHARLO, I don't think that it's necessarily what the Gennady Golovkin win was. I don't think it's necessarily even going to be possibly what the Sergey Kovalev win was. I think that debatably, those wins, if you wanted to argue that they maybe had more impact than possibly what a JERMALL CHARLO win is going to have, just in terms of talking about JERMALL CHARLO's boxing skills. For us people overall that, look through a microscope and really see overall what the fighters are about. And I think that the channels, even the ones that have been pushing for the JERMALL CHARLO and Canelo Alvarez fight, and I don't have a problem with anyone pushing for the Canelo versus Charlo fight because I think that it's a great fight. But if you are going to spread the narrative that JERMALL CHARLO, that you believe that because he's this undefeated black fighter and all this sort of stuff that, he would have a greater chance than any of the fighters, any of the bums, the quote-unquote bums that Canelo was facing, well then, you should keep that same energy. And when it comes to a certain amount of these channels like Dante's Boxing Nation and Boxing Ego, it seems like more than likely, it seems more realistic that the Canelo Alvarez versus JERMALL CHARLO fight is going to happen next. And now that it is likely that it is going to happen next, what are they basically saying? Oh, well, Charlo, he's coming off of his worst performance. Why are they fighting now that they're at different weight classes? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? It's almost like that one high school bully that you knew in high school. That one high school bully that said that he could whoop every dude's ass or, basically said, oh, if I got in a fight with this dude or this dude, I'd completely whoop their ass. And then someone finally confronts them because they're tired of their shit. And basically they said, okay, you know what? You want a real fight? Let's fight. And then all of a sudden that bully, all of a sudden he don't have the same energy anymore because he never truly thought that someone was actually going to call him out on his shit and that someone was actually going to have the courage overall to face up to him or stand up to him. That's the same energy that I get from these guys. These guys that talk so much shit on Canelo Alvarez for the past several years that, they basically been saying, oh, this guy beats him, this guy beats him, this guy beats him. But then all of a sudden, when it comes to JERMALL CHARLO possibly facing Canelo, all I'm hearing is several excuses loaded into the chamber. It just is what it is. But anyways, we're going to review a video by Mr. Boxing Ego. We're going to see what he has to say. Let's get into it.
The Canelo Alvarez man fans don't know what Canelo's going to do, and they are desperately trying to save face as they anticipate his next move. Is he going to fight MacBook Air? Is he going to fight Charlo? Either way, the Canelo man fan.
I don't think overall a man that basically went borderline homosexual the way that he did over Deontay Wilder and basically overall was caressing over his body and basically, Google guying over him. I don't think that you really have the right to call anyone Canelo man fans or anyone man fans. I mean, shit, you're about you're about a borderline homosexual yourself when it comes to overall some of the fighters that you tend to love. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Are out to lunch. Stay tuned to this video. We're going to talk about it. We unpack. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego. And I'm back with some more boxing. We unpack coming to you live. Subscribe to the channel for the latest and greatest. I promise you don't want to miss anything. The beginning of the year is a little bit slower for boxing, but we still got a lot to cook on. But best believe it will heat up. And again, for that, you do not want to miss this heat that I will be bringing. Now, one conversation, you guys see it on the screen, says sources, Canelo Alvarez ponders bouts with JERMALL CHARLO and Dmitry Bivol and a trilogy with Gennady Golovkin. I've already stated my opinion. For starters, Gennady had no guy and Max every. I don't want to see that fight. I don't care to see.
I'm not really a person that cares to see that fight either. And it's no offense against Gennady Golovkin. It's not that he's still not a decent fighter at this point in time in his career. But I'm not even sure if Gennady Golovkin at this point in time in his career would beat JERMALL CHARLO or shit. I'm not even quite sure if he would have defeated the undefeated Caleb Plant. Gennady Golovkin, in my opinion, I just think all in all now, is that me saying necessarily that JERMALL CHARLO, that he's better than Caleb Plant in my opinion? Not necessarily, but JERMALL CHARLO certainly does have more power. What I will say is this, Gennady Golovkin, I just think that he's been French toast. I think that he's pretty much been toast ever since that Canelo Alvarez rematch. Ever since he had that all-out war with Canelo Alvarez in the rematch, and that truly is one of the greatest fights that I've personally ever seen, that really went tit for tat. Ever since then, he's never been the same fighter.
Canelo versus Triple G Part 3. What's the point? Why am I watching that so many years, different weight classes from the original two? You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like...
I don't know why people all in all keep bringing up different weight classes. Maybe they're just saying all in all that they want to see unification. But some of these guys are acting like Canelo Alvarez, like he's so much bigger than these guys. Dude, Canelo is not a natural 168-pounder. Yes, he rehydrates at 185. It's a decent stature, so that's a part of the reason why, he has good punch resistance, kind of like Gervonta Tank Davis when he faces people at 135. But, at the end of the day, Gervonta Tank Davis, kind of like Canelo, they're still very short and, stout for their divisions. It helps them in a way because, of course, they have great punch resistance and great power for the divisions. But at the end of the day, Gervonta Tank Davis is still only a person with about a 67-inch reach. And Canelo, he has a 71-inch reach, and he's only about 5'9" at the tallest. So, like I said, Canelo, what he's doing, it's still very impressive.
I don't know, maybe I'm a bit nostalgic, but you can say what you want about me, but you can't say I'm not consistent. It's kind of like the movie Coming to America. The first movie...
Well, are you consistent? Because just like Dante's Boxing Nation, when it comes down to it, you guys have been claiming for so long that JERMALL CHARLO is such a bigger fight than some of these other guys. And all of a sudden, you guys are kind of putting excuses in the chamber. But we'll see what happens.
Movie is a classic. I still haven't even made the time to watch part 2. Because I know it's not going to, no matter what, it's not going to really match up well 20, 30 years later to the original OG classic. Triple G, it had no got Max, big drama, right? And Canelo in 2022 and beyond. Triple G is 40 years old, people. And he's had an illustrious amateur.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. But I do find it interesting how, like I said, ego, depending on which fighter it is, you can tell all in all, who he wants to give more chances and who he doesn't want. And, it just is what it is. Because these guys like ego, they'll say, oh, well, Gary Russell Jr., they should get a rematch. But if it comes to someone else, boy, that they don't like a Gennady Golovkin, or if Fury would have lost to Deontay Wilder trilogy, they would not give a shit.
Career 300.
Or Lomachenko losing to Teofimo Lopez, of course.
50 plus fights. He's been through wars as a professional, like 40 fights, somewhere right around there. At the end of the day, it's just not something I'm anticipating. So to me, Triple G is probably fighting Murata anyway. So that leaves JERMALL CHARLO and Dimitri Bivol probably the main options. I'll talk about this more and more, but I really feel that the DAZN curse strikes again. They will end up losing money trying to compete with premier boxing champions for a fight with Dimitri Bivol and Canelo Alvarez. Bivol is a crafty fighter, no knock on him, he could fight, but
Well, I'm not really sure if they'll lose money. But what I will say is that do I think that it would make as much money as the JERMALL CHARLO fight? Probably not. Just because JERMALL CHARLO, he's a black American fighter. And of course, a lot of black American fighters, especially, they do have a lot of promotion behind them. Because, of course, black American fighters, kind of like Mexican fighters or Latino fighters, they can tend to be more dominant in the sport. And Dimitri Bivol, of course, he's pretty much what's known as an Eastern European fighter. Now, to me, of course, he looks Asian when it comes down to it. He looks like he's of Asian descent, but of course he is born and raised in Russia, I believe. So, still would be technically counted as an Eastern European fighter. Same with Artur Beterbiev and some of those other guys. It still would be a very decent fight. I still think that, like I said, Canelo, you can put him in there with a dog turd, and more than likely the numbers are going to do very, very decently well. But like I said, it'll be interesting overall to see what happens. I think that a Canelo versus Dimitri Bivol fight, I still think that it will do massive numbers. The Gennady Golovkin trilogy will possibly even do decent numbers because to the casual fan, they may actually believe that Gennady Golovkin still has a decent chance. I don't think he does, but we'll see what happens.
Boxing, when you're at the superstar status like Canelo Alvarez, you have to be able to put butts in seats. And Dimitri Bivol,
right? But Canelo Alvarez, when it comes down to it, he can fight anyone, and he puts butts in seats. So, to be honest, like I said, unless he fights someone that is completely unknown, I don't think it's really going to be an issue.
He's fighting on co-features, unheralded cards. He's not a popular name, things of this sort. So I don't really know how that would bode or fare well with.
Like, it's so interesting how he talked about Gervonta Tank Davis so differently. He was saying, you guys are so focused on his numbers, but did you guys like the event? Like, it was a good event, why you pocket watching, then when it comes to another fighter, he just has a completely different energy. Like, come on. Yeah, you're consistent, all right. Consistent with that bullshit. Anyway.
A next fight for Canelo Alvarez, but that's the latest rumor is that Canelo's next fight is still undecided, and what is he gonna do? The other option is MacBook Air, and I already told you that's garbage. Happy first of the month. It's February 1st. It's the first of the month.
Like I said, I don't necessarily mind the Makabu fight, but after that fight, if Canelo overall does win that fight, he is going to have to face a real decent matchup. And when I say decent matchup, I'm not only talking about a fighter that is looked at as a high contender, but probably going to have to do decent numbers as well, like a Charlo, Benavidez, yada, 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 yada.
And I see my sister was already there. She gonna run and go get my stare. Shout out to Bone Thugs and Harmony. And back to the boxing, Canelo Alvarez versus MacBook Air is pathetic. Of course, he's moving up in weight to fight that fight, but if you watch MacBook's last fight, it just wasn't scintillating. It wasn't something that had a lot of replay value, and many people who watched it believed that MacBook Air truly lost the fight, and it was a robbery.
I would have to watch the fight for myself because, of course, when certain people have narratives, that's one of the first things I always love to pull out of their ass. Oh, that was a robbery. So I would have to watch it, but I tried to watch it the other day. I didn't think it was the most entertaining fight, so I didn't watch it for myself. Listen, I don't think anyone believes that Makabu is an elite A grade fighter. It could still have some decent value because, of course, that would be Canelo chasing history. So, like I said, I wouldn't mind the fight, but I would prefer a JERMALL CHARLO fight next.
Now, in my opinion, MacBook Air shouldn't even be in the conversation for consideration based on his last performance. So that leaves most likely the two publicized offers, Canelo versus Bivol or the Canelo versus Charlo fight, which leads to this video we unpacked. Boy, I tell you, it must be hard to be a Canelo Alvarez man fan. So here's the situation. Canelo Alvarez fans tend to shoot themselves in the left and the right foot and then get up and try to walk. And unfortunately for them, and fortunate for me, it doesn't work like that. And the great thing about what I do on YouTube.
Actually, that's not true at all. A lot of channels and a lot of people, they have very, very big followings and they can pretty much say whatever stupid shit they want. That's why so many of these channels, when they were wrong about that Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder bullshit, and they ended up getting proved wrong when it came down to it, they still have their same dumbass followers. Because, people of, a flock or whatever, so people of the same feather, flock together. Birds of the same feather flock together, as people overall, say. So it is what it is.
There's breadcrumbs. All these videos is documented. Now, in the case of Canelo versus Charlo, this is the issue. My question is, what makes Canelo want to fight Charlo all of a sudden when for the last several years, Charlo has been chasing Canelo to no avail?
I don't believe that Canelo Alvarez until now has ever really seen a super duper huge appeal with Charlo. But I think now that he looks at him and he says, you know what? This dude is not only a good name on my resume if I can get the victory over him, but he's debatably overall the one with the most amount of a name overall that I could possibly fight. I think he takes a look at Charlo and David Benavidez, and I think he says, you know what? Those are really interesting fights. I'm going to take those fights eventually. But the only fight overall, like I said, the only fighter from those lower weight divisions that he doesn't seem interested in at all is Andre. Because I don't think he thinks overall that, not only do I think that he thinks that he's a little bit tricky, but I just don't think he thinks, you know what, this dude, the risk just doesn't outweigh, or excuse me, the risk, the reward really does not outweigh the risk.
Right, and I have multiple videos that I could easily make to prove this. So if you guys would like that, just say so in the comment section. Or if I see a lot of haters and I see a lot of doubters, we could get to it and I'll dig in the boxing ego crates and pull out some of that footage. So JERMALL CHARLO is off of a performance that Canelo fans said wasn't impressive to them. And that's against Montiel.
Well, sure, it wasn't really impressive, but if we're going to go there, and I know the point that Ego is really trying to make, he's basically going to make the point that, oh, Canelo's only facing him now that, it's not super duper impressive. It's like, dude, do you want this fight to happen or not? Like, like these guys overall, like, they're that one girlfriend overall that, just ain't happy with anything. The man tries to change her ways overall, for all the damn time, but she just continues to bitch, and bitch. And after a while, it's like, you know what? There just ain't no making you happy. It's just like, what the hell is going on? It's like, do you want this fight to happen or do you not want this fight to happen? One day they say all in all that Canelo's ducking Charlo. Then the next day it's like, oh, well, why are you fighting him now? It's like, dude, do you want the fight to happen or not? Like, Jesus Christ.
Comes from a fight family. Me personally, I understand and respect the sport of boxing, so I didn't really see all this error in his performance. I just thought he was in there with a durable guy with some conviction.
What JERMALL CHARLO looked like to me is the same old JERMALL CHARLO that I've been watching for the past several years. A person that at times shows a little bit of greatness, but the majority of the time, he just doesn't really pop off the map for me. Like I said, when I take a look at JERMALL CHARLO, all I see is another Danny Garcia. That's all I see. Someone who is very decently gifted, someone who's talented, someone who, of course, is going to be a future Hall of Famer. But, is a win over Danny Garcia, is that a win like, Like if we're talking about Mayweather or Pacquiao, is that like a Juan Manuel Marquez win, or a Miguel Cotto win, or a Shane Mosley win, or a Oscar De La Hoya win, or a Manny Pacquiao win? No.
With some heart, with some grit, and some fights are going to be like that. But the Canelo Man fans, in an effort to belittle Jermall Charlo, they said, oh, this is not Charlo's best work. Oh, Charlo got exposed. How come Jaime Munguia knocked out Montiel? But
Well, did they really say that it's not his best work? If you're a Canelo Alvarez fan that allegedly overall wants to tear down that fight, would you really say it like that? Would you really just say overall that this is not Jermall Charlo's best work, or would you just regularly say that this is the regular Jermall Charlo? Because in my opinion, the Jermall Charlo that I've seen in that fight is the same Jermall Charlo that I've been seeing for years upon years upon years upon years. And I've been seeing certain channels now saying, oh, well, maybe Canelo's taking it now because he's declining. There is no decline about it, dude. Jermall Charlo is the same fighter, all in all, that I've been seeing for the past several years. It just is what it is. It's the same shit. Stiff, doesn't have a whole lot of head movement, doesn't have a great feet. You know, when it comes down to it, does not have a great boxing IQ. All right? Can be beat. It just is what it is.
Charlo couldn't. Charlo's a bum, and these types of things. And then now all of a sudden, off of that performance, they're saying that Canelo may want to fight against Charlo. And he's not even at 168 pounds versus in the past they could.
Basically the same point that Dante's Boxing Nation was trying to make. That old Canelo Alvarez, he's going to have the size advantage over Charlo. No, he's not. Charlo not only is, about 4 inches taller than Canelo Alvarez when it comes down to it, he has the reach advantage over him. And even in terms of weight, they're pretty much the same weight. Jermall Charlo, when it comes down to it, you can argue all in all that he is a natural 168-pounder. He's very, very big for the 160-pound division.
Fought at 154 or 160, 155 if you want to count Canelo weight. So these are the things that I'm going to continue to explore because it doesn't make sense. What makes right now the right time? And just to further that point, I have videos that I've done in the past regarding this 2 months ago.
In my opinion, all in all, what makes right now the right time is that Jermall Charlo he's not really going to be any bigger of an asset. And right now, in my opinion, is pretty much the perfect fight for Canelo Alvarez to make because he's already got through Saunders, he's already got through Plant, he's already got through Smith, he's already got through Golovkin and Jacobs. There's only a few other names that within those lighter weight classes that he would really have to check off his list. There's Andrade, but I don't think that fight's ever going to happen. Not unless Andrade overall, gets a really, really big win, but we'll see. There's Benavidez, of course, who's kind of newer on the map, and there's Jermall Charlo. Those are really the only ones left that Canelo has yet to fight within the lower weight classes. And I think once he defeats David Benavidez and Charlo, if he's able to get past both of them, he's going to say, then I'm going to take my attention to 175.
36,000 views. You guys see it. Charlo, they went to Canelo Caleb Plant fight. And this was actually Jermall that said it. And Jermall said, Canelo's tired. I could beat him in New League Audio. So make sure you guys check that video, right? So that's one. And if you look at the comments in those videos that I was doing, right? You was looking at the comments, you will see a bunch of negative comments about, oh, Charlo ain't this and Charlo's not all that. And Canelo would, beat him easy. 1 year ago, 33,000 views. Canelo Alvarez, Jermall Charlo, seriously fighting. And this is another video I did. Boom, you guys see it on the screen, right? And it looks like, so this video was at the time Jermall Charlo was trying to fight the Derevyanchenko, and then Canelo said he wanted to fight Derevyanchenko. So anyway, in this video too, you will see a bunch of negative comments about Jermall Charlo and so on and so forth. Here's a video I have queued up. Make sure you guys check that on the channel. It says Canelo Alvarez versus Jermall Charlo debate topics we unpacked, right? You see this video, 8,000 views from July 1st, 2019. Now, I'm not the smartest brother in the world, but that's 2019, and we are clear into a brand new month in 2022. So several years ago, right? 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, right? That I was doing videos about Canelo Charlo. So again, I'm curious as to what made now the right time for that particular fight. And I've highlighted some of the comments so we could take a look at what the Canelo fans were saying. Boom.
Right, but like I said, do you want the fight to happen or do you not want the fight to happen? Like I said, it's just so interesting because these guys have been bitching and moaning for years that the fight overall should happen. And it's not like JERMALL CHARLO is like 35 years old. I believe that he's even younger than Canelo, or he's around the same age as Canelo. So it's like, dude, do you want this fight to happen or not? Because people now are bitching and moaning overall that, oh, well, you know, why you fighting him now? It's like, dude, come on, really? Like, come on.
This guy is full of ish, and apparently I'm that guy. I'm that guy, right? So apparently I'm full of ish. Danny Jacobs just recently said on Instagram he wanted all the smoke with Charlo, which is really has nothing to do with what that video is about. Where all this energy when Jacobs pulled up on Charlo and called him out during the interview. This is what the Canelo Man fans do. The video wasn't about...
Well, you know what? He has a point. Because why do you call out Canelo Alvarez for allegedly avoiding fighters? You know, certain fighters that may come to his interview, or certain fighters all in all that are undefeated champions, or people that are top-ranked contenders. And Canelo Alvarez allegedly won't face him because allegedly he's scared. But then JERMALL CHARLO, he won't face someone like David Benavidez or Danny Jacobs. And all of a sudden you say, oh, well, that's not the point. It's not the point because it's not the fighter that you want to tear down. It's the same shit with Dante. That's why when Dante, he made that bullshit excuse about JERMALL CHARLO. Oh, well, I'm not going to criticize JERMALL CHARLO not calling out overall, you know, Demetrius Andre because that's a black fighter versus a black fighter. And the biggest rivalry in boxing is a black fighter versus other fighters. Like, dude, what kind of bullshit is that? You're the person that alleges on a constant basis that black fighters are always the creme de la creme. And don't get me wrong, the majority of the time they are. Usually black fighters in boxing usually do tend to be the creme de la creme. Whether you want to talk about Muhammad Ali, you know, Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, you know, Andre Ward, Floyd Mayweather Jr., Roy Jones Jr., whoever the hell else you want to talk about. No problem with that whatsoever. No problem. Just the facts. But if you're a person all in all that just alleges like a Dante's Boxing Nation or Boxing Ego, that Canelo, that he's avoiding the undefeated black champions when it comes down to the biggest threats all in all, it's like, okay, then, well, the fight's now about to possibly happen. Why do you have a big problem with the fight happening? You know, it just is what it is. And if you're also a person that alleges that black fighters are always the most dominant, well, then that would mean that JERMALL CHARLO, overall, to beat Danny Jacobs or to beat Demetrius Boo Boo Andre, that would debatably even be a greater win than the Canelo Alvarez win. Isn't that correct? But they don't have that same energy. You know why that is? Because they're full of shit. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Oh, Danny Jacobs and an altercation in the hallway, verbal altercation. But he's saying I'm full of ish, you know, because of something totally unrelated. What about when Andre called out Charlo on the microphone?
Something totally unrelated. Basically, what he's asking you when it comes down to it is, if you're going to criticize Canelo Alvarez for allegedly avoiding these fighters, why are you not getting after JERMALL CHARLO for allegedly not wanting to face other top contenders? Because if we're really getting into it, why the hell has JERMALL CHARLO not fought some of the other top contenders? Who the hell has JERMALL CHARLO really beat besides Julian J. Rock Williams in his career? It just is what it is. And Charlo's a good fighter. I've always somewhat rooted for him. I don't think that he's good enough to beat Canelo, but it is what it is. The point being is this, and a lot of people see the same bullshit that I do. If you're going to have your own platform, in my opinion, you have to try to be as logical and objective as you possibly can. It just is what it is. All right? And, you know, JERMALL CHARLO is no offense against him, but he basically has been waiting for that Canelo Alvarez lottery ticket for, you know, many, many years. It just is what it is.
Phone at his press conference in front of everyone. Charlo ducked Jacobs and Andre. Facts, right? So instead of making the fight in 2019, this is the resistance that we've heard from Canelo fans. Now, some of the fans that are just fans of boxing, they're saying make the fight happen. That's 2 years ago. We've been asking for this fight, right? And look, shout out to this person. These comments are from 2 years ago in a video I did. Man, the Canelo fans trying hard to defend this guy. Just fight, man, and get it over with. Win, lose, or draw. Even if Charlo or Andre win, they will make it a draw anyway. So I'm wondering what changed. Shout out to my regular Diego.
Right, but basically you want JERMALL CHARLO. You want JERMALL CHARLO or Demetrius Boo Boo Andre to possibly get that big lottery ticket against Canelo Alvarez. But then when it comes to them proving themselves against others, you basically say, well, no, you know, Canelo Alvarez just needs to fight them. Listen, I get it at the end of the day. I would love to see those fights happen just as much as the next. But if you're a person that really claims that you're being avoided by a lot of people and, basically all in all, that Canelo Alvarez won't fight you. Errol Spence had a very similar issue. And Terence Crawford apparently had a very similar issue. You know what they did? They fought fighters all in all to get to that level. Floyd Mayweather Jr. had a very similar issue. You know what he did? He fought one of the bigger draws. He fought the opportunities that were available to him. So all in all, when it comes down to it, if you're going to criticize Canelo Alvarez for not allegedly facing certain top contenders, you should also criticize JERMALL CHARLO and yada 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 yada. And personally, Mr. Ego, I've never heard you criticize any of those guys, at least on a consistent basis. At least I haven't heard it. Now, if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. I'm not a person that that is bothered when admitting when I'm wrong. When I'm wrong. I don't mind eating crow, but I've never seen you do it. All right, it is what it is.
Go 619. He also said make the effing fight happen, right? So the real fans were saying make the fight happen, while the Canelo fans were like, look at the names, faces, and profile pics of the people doing the most hating. This guy says Canelo will fight all one by one. But this was
right, but let's be real, Ego. Let's also look at the channels. Let's look at the main demographic that is tearing down Canelo Alvarez. It just is what it is. Who are they mainly? Like I said, I make these videos, and a certain amount of people, of course, they come on my channel and they say, oh, well, these guys are telling the truth because Canelo ain't facing the best, and you're calling them racist and all this other bullshit just because they're calling out Canelo. Dude, when Canelo has fought Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Danny Jacobs, Lara, Gennady Golovkin, Sergey Kovalev, there's only so much shit you can talk about him. Like I said, it would be different if he were a Mikey Garcia or a Gervonta Tank Davis. But these same channels will make literally up and down excuses about Gervonta Tank Davis not facing elite grade competition. But then when Canelo faces undefeated champions, they're allegedly C-grade Caucasian fighters and they're not elite fighters. Like, come on, dude. Just stop.
2 years ago. So he didn't fight the people that I wanted to see him fight that I mentioned in this video, like Andre Charlo. So why is it taking so long? And he's able to fight Avni Yildirim, Rocky Fielding, and Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant, a bunch of European fighters from England, Liam Smith,
Like I said, they basically allege over all these Caucasian fighters. Well, JERMALL CHARLO is apparently this elite black fighter that is supposed to be so far ahead of them. So when the fight happens, you give Canelo Alvarez full credit. All right, because then he will have defeated one of the undefeated black champions. All right, JERMALL CHARLO is allegedly so far ahead of some of these guys, he should do better. So we'll see what happens.
How did all these, Amir Khan, how did all these fights happen? But it's taken a month of Sundays to even mention Charlo's name. And then when Charlo has a performance where he was in there with the guy that people thought, including a lot of the Canelo man fans, thought that Charlo should stop pretty easily. Now this is the time.
Right, but JERMALL CHARLO has had shit performances in his career before. And if you're going to make the point all in all that Canelo Alvarez, that he's just waiting on and he's preying on these guys that have the worst performances, like, come on, dude. This is why I say, and it's no disrespect to Mr. Ego. You can have your own platform. I don't mind that. I think it's a great thing to have your own platform because, don't get me wrong, ESPN and, a lot of them guys, they can be full of shit too. Don't get me wrong. But this dude is so full of shit. Like, it's just so obnoxious to hear these narratives because I heard the same shit with Floyd Mayweather Jr. and many other great fighters that I've ever heard. They all make these same bullshit excuses. Oh, well, they're purposely picking fights, overall when they're at their worst. Like, dude, just stop. Like really? You're talking about Caleb Plant, who is an undefeated champion. Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, who is a 2-weight division champion. Sergey Kovalev, yes, he wasn't at the greatest point of his career, at least at the same when he fought Andre Ward, but he still was a very decent fighter. It still was looked at as a very decent fight. He fought Danny Jacobs when Danny Jacobs was a champion. He fought Gennady Golovkin when he was a top 3, top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. I've literally had people in my comment section make some of the stupidest points, and they say, oh, man, don't get into the hype with Canelo, man. It's nothing about hype. I can tell overall which fighters are hyped up. All right, it is what it is. All right, I can tell overall which fighters are really, really hyped up when their record is a facade. All right, Mikey Garcia's record is a facade. It is what it is. Gervonta Tank Davis's record is a facade. All right, it just is what it is. Canelo's record is not a facade. It is not smoke and mirrors. All right, Terence Bud Crawford's resume, to a degree, even though I have a great amount of love for the dude, it to a degree is a facade. Because some of the wins that you have in your career, like Kell Brook and Amir Khan, let's be real, they were completely washed up, dude. But to give Terence Bud Crawford credit, he at least defeated the guys that he did at 135 and 140. But let's be real, none of those guys were really A-grade fighters. It just is what it is. But, I'll even give Terrence Crawford, a decent amount of credit. He did defeat Gamboa and Postel when he needed to. I don't think either of those guys are A-plus fighters, but it is what it is, and he did recently defeat Sean Porter when he was at pretty much the best point in his career, or debatably. So I give you a lot of credit for that. But like I said, I'm very consistent. I give everyone, credit when I think that they deserve it. I'm not a person all in all that just does this bullshit and criticizes fighters or tries to tear down someone's brand just because I don't like them. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Where Canelo is considering Charlo when he's not even in the same weight class. Meanwhile, David Benavidez is...
When he's not even in the same weight class. Dude, do you want this fight to happen or do you not want it to happen? Like, once again, it's like that one woman overall that that overall claims that, their man don't do this, their man don't do that, But like I said, that girl, she's just never going to be happy. It's like a woman overall that constantly complains in a relationship, but she won't leave. It's like, dude, do you want this fight to happen or do you not? Are you happy with the fight or are you not? Do you want the David Benavidez fight to happen or do you not? What do you want? The thing is that you're not going to make people like this happy because they don't want Canelo Alvarez to succeed. That's why, these guys, they just overall annoy me. This is just really obnoxious.
In the same weight class, and David Morrell Jr., but of course those guys won't be considered. Puzzle says, oh, I already read that comment, right? Pistolera says, Ego, didn't Charlo was talking ish and Jacob pulled on him? See, this is the Canelo. Oh, man, it's going to be a rough 2022 for y'all. What does Jacobs and Charlo got to do with Canelo? The video is about Charlo and Canelo and why they should not fight. He said that's not okay.
Because if Charlo truly wants a Canelo Alvarez fight, then he should be willing to take some of the other big fights as well. Because if you're a person that is alleging overall that a lot of people are avoiding you, then you should take some of the bigger fights, and then eventually that fighter will be forced in a corner to fight you. That's what Errol Spence Jr. did. That's what Terrence Bud Crawford did. That's what overall a certain amount of other fighters did. That's to a degree what Vasily Lomachenko tried to do with Mikey Garcia, but Mikey Garcia, he had such a heart attack that he went up 2 weight divisions. So it is what it is anyway.
It's okay to talk ish, but now we on to a different topic. It's funny that he says now we on to a different topic as he brings up an unrelated topic. Boo Boo and Charlo have been needed to fight what happened there. So, once again, no focus on Canelo. He can only fight one boxer at a time. Everybody need to relax. Eventually, he'll fight all the top fighters, but it takes time. Canelo, he's human. He needs to rest in between fights.
But Canelo Alvarez has already fought a lot of the top fighters, so I'm not worried about that. Like I said, Rocky Fielding and Anthony Yildirim, yes, those guys are not A-grade fighters. But like I said, when you take a look at Caleb Plant, when you take a look overall at Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, all those guys are very, very decent champions.
Like everybody else.
Even Sergey Kovalev. Sergey Kovalev, was he knocked out a couple times at that point in time in his career? Yeah, but he still was a WBO champion. He still, all in all, was coming off of 2 very, very great wins.
Come on, people. Canelo ain't losing to no more blacks. Black fighters, black dudes. See? These were the comments that y'all was leaving 2 years ago. And then now, my question to you, fast forward to the future, is what makes right now the right time for Canelo versus Charlo? Which is what sources are saying, like ESPN. That's my only question. Because I know...
Well, let me ask you something. Because like I said, I'm not I'm not a Canelo Alvarez fan. I'm not a fan of any of these fighters. So like I said, I have a very consistent energy. Do you want the fight to happen now or do you not want the fight to happen? Because like I said, these same guys, they'll basically say, oh, well, Canelo, Charlo was one of the biggest fights out there. But then at the same time, then they'll bitch and moan and complain and say, oh, well, Charlo was, coming off his worst performance. It's like, okay, then, dude, so should Canelo just now fight JERMALL CHARLO and then face pretty much every other contender out there? Like, what are you talking about? Like, do you want the fight to happen or do you not want the fight to happen? That's why I say, these guys are so full of shit. They claim overall that it's a 50-50 fight. They claim all in all that they want to see the fight so bad. Then when the fight is about to happen, they make all the excuses in the book.
For a fact, and I can prove it, all y'all got to do is say yes like Flowetry in the comment section, and I'll ether y'all. Because I have video evidence, right? And Charlo has been calling for that fight. So much to the point where Canelo...
Yeah, Charlo has been calling for that fight because it's the only fight that he wants. He don't want any other fight. He only wants the Canelo Alvarez fight. He don't want the, he'll take the Gennady Golovkin fight because Golovkin at this point in time, he's also overall, worth the risk, and reward when it comes down to it. But he won't face Demetrius Bubandre. He won't face Danny Jacobs. My point being is this: if you're a fighter all in all that is allegedly so avoided, why would you not take some of the other bigger matchups overall to get you bigger opportunities? No disrespect to JERMALL CHARLO, no disrespect at all. But that dude has also been full of shit for the past several years. Everyone's avoiding you and all sort of bullshit. You didn't want to face Danny Jacobs. You didn't want to face David Benavidez. You didn't want to face Demetrius Bubandre. You didn't want to face any of those fighters.
Should have fought Charlo at 160, but Canelo Alvarez became the WBC that you see on the screen franchise champion. And as a result of having this great relationship with the WBC after burying the hatchet in beef with WBC, back when he said they made him look like he was ducking Golovkin after they patched it up, the WBC, aka We Back Canelo, has seemingly done anything to stay within Canelo's good graces. So again, these are the questions I have for the world of boxing. Is what now makes right now the right time for Canelo to fight Charlo, especially seeing how they're not in the same division. Of course, I'll watch it because they're big names, but I didn't prefer
Yeah,
it.
so you're basically that one girlfriend when it comes down to it that says, I want to leave, but I'm gonna stay with my man overall because they're just all the same bullshit. Like I said, he's like, these guys are like that one girlfriend overall that always complains about how they want to leave their man, but they'll never leave because they don't think that they can do any better. Overall, it's just like that similar energy. Like it's just constant bitching from these guys. You can never make them happy.
Play out like this, but these are the games that Canelo tends to play. I have videos that I've just showed you from 2 years ago, and Canelo could have fought at any of these opportune, that's what this video is about, opportune times. He could have fought Demetrius Andre, JERMALL CHARLO, guys like that. So why does it take so long, and why does it possibly happen now when Canelo's own fans were saying that Charlo looked suspect in his last fight? Why didn't Canelo consider Charlo?
So basically, what you're saying is that you're saying the same thing as Dante's Boxing Nation, which is that if Canelo Alvarez looks dominant over JERMALL CHARLO, all I'm really going to say is that, Canelo Alvarez, he beat a fighter that was going downhill. So all you're doing basically is talking shit. You're changing your energy now because you're now afraid that Canelo's going to whoop that ass, which more than likely he will. And like I said, I ain't got nothing against JERMALL CHARLO, and I'm not a Canelo Alvarez fanboy, but it's just so obnoxious. I've been hearing these narratives for years upon years upon years. And now overall that is finally, like I said, it's like that one high school bully that says that he can whoop anyone's ass. And then finally when someone finally confronts him, basically what does he do? He has his tail in between his legs and he backs off. Do you truly believe that Charlo is the fighter that you've been making him out to be? Because if he is, and if you still believe in him, then it's still a 50-50 fight. But all of a sudden, now that this fight is going to get signed up, what do they say? They say, oh, well, Charlo, he's really not a top 10. Like I just reviewed a video by Dante's Boxing Nation where he literally even told on himself. He said that Charlo, win over Charlo, it doesn't really do anything for Canelo because he's not ranked within the top 10 pound for pound. Okay, then, so what the hell does it really make a difference for then? You know what I mean? You initially ranked Charlo once upon a time within your top 10 pound for pound, but all of a sudden when Canelo Alvarez is going to fight him, all of a sudden he's not in your top 10 pound for pound anymore? Like, come on, dude.
After the Derevyanchenko performance, where I thought he looked really impressive. I thought Charlo looked really good, pause, versus Sergey Derevyanchenko, who I also believe defeated Gennady. Big drama. Hey, no, guys, right? I thought Triple G.
Well, you can argue that he beat Gennady Golovkin, but that was a complete shell of what Gennady Golovkin used to be. And it was still close enough to where I didn't mind Golovkin getting the decision. I don't remember what I scored it exactly. It's been so long since I watched that fight. But Sergey Derevyanchenko, he's not an A-grade fighter. Sergey Derevyanchenko could not even beat Brandon Adams in his last fight, so that tells you all you need to know about Sergey Derevyanchenko.
He definitely lost, and that was a robbery. And then right after that, JERMALL CHARLO settled the score as at middleweight and beat Derevyanchenko convincingly. So these are the moves that Canelo tends to do, and I think it's apparent why. And now there's other guys that have emerged like David Benavidez that are interesting fights. And finally, when they're not in the same weight class, Canelo is considering JERMALL CHARLO. Very.
when they're not in the same weight class. So you think all in all that JERMALL CHARLO is going to have a massive weight disadvantage? Like I said, these guys, man, apparently all of a sudden they don't want the fight to happen. Like, like oh my god.
Very funny how these things tend to work. So these are the reasons that Canelo doesn't get received the same way as some of the Mexican leyendas like Julio Cesar Chavez and Juan Manuel Marquez and Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera, right? These are some of the reasons because
Right, but Canelo Alvarez is greater than almost every single fighter that you just mentioned. It just is what it is. The only Mexican fighter, in my opinion, that can even debatably be above Canelo is Julio Cesar Chavez. That's the only one. Now, of course, some people, of course, they would debate Salvador Sanchez. I think Salvador Sanchez was a terrifically gifted fighter. I think that he was extremely skilled. You know, some may even debate more skilled than Canelo. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that, but his career, in my opinion, was just too short.
the games. Marquez never did this. He fought Pacquiao at Pacquiao's prime when Pacquiao because
What the hell are you guys talking about? These are the same guys that criticized Marquez all the way back then for allegedly avoiding the black fighter Timothy Bradley when he was undefeated. And Bradley ended up defeating Marquez in a very, very tough fight. So all of a sudden, you know, Marquez and Morales and Barrera, they never avoided a fight and all this other bullshit, but they're not the main target anymore. Canelo is. So, you know, it is what it is. Anyway.
if you look at the Pacquiao Marquez saga, they happened over the span of several years. So within those years, there were definitely prime years for Pacquiao because outside of Marquez, Pacquiao was dogging everybody. You know what I'm saying? But Marquez was the guy that always gave Pacquiao issue and very.
Right, but Marquez is not greater than Canelo. And I know a lot of people that are going to disagree with that. Let me state this again, and I've said it 100 times. Marquez is not greater than Canelo. He's not more skilled than Canelo. He's not better than Canelo. He's not the greater athlete than Canelo. And he has not accomplished more than what Canelo has done. It just is what it is. And that's why Marquez has talked so much shit on Canelo Alvarez over the past several years, because he knows that Canelo Alvarez has surpassed him. And he don't like it. But it is what it is. Anyway.
Tough fights, right? He gave him very tough fights. So Marquez didn't do this. He literally fought prime Pacquiao in Pacquiao prime years. It wasn't, and if anything, Marquez was the one at the deficit. Shout out to Nacho Beristain. He was the one at a deficit because at one point Pacquiao had already moved up where Marquez was more of a lightweight and he had to fight him in the third and fourth fight at welterweight, you know? Especially that third fight, right?
Right, but Pacquiao was not a natural welterweight. So your point overall of basically saying of, oh, when they're in different weight classes, if you're basically trying to allege that Canelo's going to have a, you know, a big weight advantage, that point is basically null and void because that doesn't make any sense. You know, don't get me wrong, you know, certain fighters, when they move up, do they have a certain weight advantage? Yeah, sure, you can argue that. But at the same time, Canelo, he's not really gaining pounds as he moves up. He's pretty much staying the same weight.
That third fight.
Because Canelo's been hydrating at 185 to 190 for like the past 10 years.
So Marquez was not as experienced in the welterweight category as Pacquiao and didn't have as many fights in the higher weight class.
Right, but Pacquiao, all in all, when it comes down to it, he's not a natural welterweight. So if you're alleging all in all that that's the reason why he lost to Pacquiao when it came down to it, that ain't going to fly. And on top of that, you know, if Marquez, you know, Canelo Alvarez, he was not super duper, you know, experienced in the light heavyweight division. He was not super duper experienced in the super middleweight division when it came down to it. But guess what? He went up in those weight classes and he won. Would you be overall alleging the same thing with Vasily Lomachenko? That he was not super duper experienced overall against elite, strong 135 pounders that have the natural stature of a 140 pounder like a Teofimo Lopez. So we're going to bar and give Vasily Lomachenko the excuse, no, you wouldn't. So let's stop.
But Canelo, he makes sure that that doesn't happen and that's not the case. Like, let's say if JERMALL CHARLO moved up to 160 before him, Canelo would never in life fight JERMALL CHARLO, who had more fights at 160. He's going to fight JERMALL.
Dude, what are you talking about? He fought Caleb Plant that had a decent amount more fights at 168, and he fought overall Callum Smith, who was the Ring Magazine champion. What the hell are you talking about? And then he fought Gennady Golovkin overall, who was pretty much like the undisputed middleweight king. Like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, unless you're talking about overall, him just moving up straight away. But come on, I mean, it is what it is.
Oh, Charlo,
Because Canelo is not a natural super middleweight. He's not a person that has a natural 168 pounder. It just is what it is.
off of a performance that people were highly critical of, and now possibly fight him at a point where he would have to move up 8 pounds with no acclimating fights, just move straight up. So, like I said, business is business. It's a big fight, so I get it if it does happen. But at the end of the day, I don't prefer it. I think it should have happened as I.
So what is Ego basically just telling you? He does not want the fight to happen. He does not want the Jermall Charlo fight to happen. After talking all this shit for several years, what does Ego basically say in the end, just like the rest of these channels? He doesn't want the fight to happen. Why? Because he knows that Charlo's about to get his ass whooped.
Stated at 54, 55, Canelo weight 160. And it's just so funny to see when I do these updated videos, because again, I have videos from years ago, and people, this is the comments 2 years ago: Canelo ain't losing to no more blacks, not losing to no black dudes. But at the same time,
And are there certain Canelo Alvarez fans or certain Latino fans that, of course, have racially biased things as well? Yes, of course. But when it comes to Ego, whatever energy that you put out there is the energy that you're going to get back, is the way that I look at it. It just is what it is, because we all know Ego, he has a certain racial agenda as well.
why does it take 2 years to have fought Charlo? And why not fight Charlo off of some of his best performances rather than the performance where people,
Well, if
desire
he's
to.
a great fighter, and if you think all in all that all along it was a 50-50 fight, like if you've always been alleging, and you think all in all that it's such a great fight, then just one bad performance should not define Jermall Charlo. If Vasyl Lomachenko, when it came down to it, if he were to face Gervonta Tank Davis next, just because his last performance against Richard Commey, even though it was a very dominant performance, I thought maybe he could have been able to, it would have been better, of course, if he could have stopped him. Am I going to sit here and say, oh, well, that fight's garbage now? Why wouldn't you fight Lomachenko years ago? Of course, it probably would have been better years ago, but Lomachenko's still an elite point in his career. Like, come on, dude.
Bit more. And even the Canelo fans said that Charlo was exposed. I did videos about all of this. So watch my Boxing Ego watch party. That's what some of the comments were saying. They were saying, "Oh, Charlo, I expected more. He didn't even knock out Fernando Montiel, and Jaime Mugi."
I didn't really expect much more out of Charlo because I know who Jermall Charlo is.
He knocked him out.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I was someone expecting him to knock out Montiel, someone who's pretty much a C-grade fighter. But am I surprised that Charlo was not able to knock him out? Not really, because Montiel, he probably fought back a little bit with Charlo. He also has decent power. And I think once Charlo felt that, he said, wow, this dude may be a little bit tougher than I once originally thought.
Previous to that, when Charlo was gunning for the fight with Canelo Alvarez, I'm hearing all these excuses as to why Charlo doesn't deserve it, saying, "Oh, he ain't beat nobody. He can't sell tickets. Who is he beat? He needs to fight Jacobs. He needs to fight Andrade." And then once again,
I think that Canelo versus Charlo was a great fight. But, we'll see what happens. But like I said, I don't think that he's really above Jacobs or the Planter, Saunders, or Callum Smith level. I think that Golovkin is the only fighters within those two weight classes that has really separated himself out of all those fighters.
and this is what the Canelo fans do. They wait for Master Canelo to pull a rabbit out the hat and announce who he's going to fight, and then they go in defend mode. That's it. And
Right, so you don't go in defend mode when it comes to a Gervonta Tank Davis or a Deontay Wilder or some of the other fighters that you fight, because you're not a man fan either. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's good to be a man fan. I'm not saying that it's good to be a fan. But it's just so hilarious. This dude, all in all, when it comes down to it, how you going to criticize other people of being man fans? And I mean, like, shit, you should have heard some of the comments that this dude was saying about Deontay Wilder. He was really acting like this dude's mistress.
implore everybody to think for yourself and see what makes sense. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to look as foolish if you go with logic and make it make sense.
I agree, but you don't have an ounce of logic. So what the hell are you talking about?
People,
That's why you were that same idiot, just as many of those other channels that alleged overall that Tyson Fury was putting something in the gloves and all sorts of stupid bullshit. You don't have an ounce of logic. You're an idiot. It is what it is.
Canelo just said a couple months ago when the WBC did that convention in Mexico that he was going to fight cruiserweight fight with MacBook Air of Congo, the Canelo fans are like, yeah. This makes sense to me. That's a great fight. Now, I don't even know if he's going to fight that guy. And you look dumb because you just defended this fight knowing that wouldn't have been an impressive fight, even though they were calling it a historic fight. So what was the basis? And then, like I said, years ago.
Right, but then Gervonta Tank Davis, he'll face someone like a Mario Barris, and allegedly overall it's so great because he's going up in weight. And then he'll face Isaac Pitbull Cruz, and it's like, well, did you appreciate the event? Why are you worrying about his pay-per-view numbers? Why are you worrying about that? Ego, just stop, dude.
When JERMALL CHARLO was in the same division as Canelo, he was pushing for Canelo fights, and Canelo fans made all these excuses saying, oh, Charlo ain't beat no one.
You know another fighter that he beat all in all that was very experienced in another weight class? Danny Jacobs. He also overall fought Miguel Cotto when he was a little bit more experienced in middleweight, I believe. You know, even though Cotto, of course, was naturally smaller. He also fought, what the hell was his name? Sergey Kovalev, you know, who was obviously more experienced at light heavyweight. Of course, he had a couple of knockout losses at that point in time, but still, he avenged his knockout loss to later Alvarez, gained back his title, and then he was facing the undefeated British prospect in, what the hell was his name? Anthony Yard, I believe, and he ended up knocking him out. So let's not just sit here and say that Sergey Kovalev, that he was just a C-class fighter or anything like that, because that would not be the truth.
Why should he get to fight, and he's a bum, and he can't fight? He need to fight Andrade first. And now, okay, so he didn't fight Andrade. He didn't fight Jacobs and all this other stuff, hoopla, that Canelo man fans were saying. And then now all of a sudden he's in the running off of a performance that they also criticized from JERMALL CHARLO. It's funny how this continues to...
I understand your point, Ego, but at the end of the day, if Charlo is the fighter that you allege when it comes down to it, that you allege that he has been, and if he is such a challenge for Canelo Alvarez that you allege that he is, then all in all, he will, that he will be more impressive in this fight.
Ego Stradamus strikes again. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. I promise we unpack 2022. You're not going to want to miss what I got cooking up. Deuces.
Yes, that's right. Ego Stradamus does strike again. Anyways, that's overall pretty much what I got to say for this video. But Ego basically just admitted flat out he does not want to see JERMALL CHARLO versus Canelo Alvarez. But I just thought that was very particularly interesting because once again, for these guys alleging all in all for so long that Canelo has not faced any fighters and he needs to face the elite black fighters, all of a sudden, he's going to go after JERMALL CHARLO. Yes, JERMALL CHARLO did not have the most of impressive performances. And Ego, you just said earlier in the video, when it came down to it, that apparently you thought that Charlo, that the performance was not even as unimpressive as what a lot of people were saying. But you stated yourself that you don't want to see the fight. What does that say about you? That every time that you tried to build up JERMALL CHARLO bigger than what he actually was, you've been full of shit this whole entire time. And I knew that. It just is what it is. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.